When I wired my parents the last $20,000 to erase their crushing debt, I imagined Thanksgiving at our family table would taste sweeter than ever. A week later, my phone buzzed with a text. "Don't come to Thanksgiving. Your brother's hosting. No reason, no thanks. Just exile, wrapped in politeness." I stared at the screen, my chest tight, wondering if I had somehow ruined everything, but I didn't know the truth yet. The lies, the inheritance plans, the betrayal, decades in the making. And once I did, the woman they thought would stay silent would become their greatest mistake. The day I made the final transfer, I felt light, almost giddy. $120,000 gone from my savings in an instant, but it was worth it. I told myself this was the last hurdle, the thing that would finally free my parents from the shadow of debt. Mum's voice cracked on the phone when I told her it was done. "Oh, honey, you've saved us," she said. And I could hear Dad murmuring something in the background, his tone warm for once. They invited me over that night for dinner, and I imagined it would be one of those rare evenings where everything felt easy, where we could sit together without tension hanging in the air. When I arrived, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic filled the kitchen. Mum's cheeks were flushed. Dad even hugged me, a stiff, quick hug, but a hug nonetheless. Mark was there too, leaning casually against the counter, his smile just shy of sincere. We ate, we laughed, and at the end of the night, Mum suggested a group photo. "For the family album," she said. We all crowded together in front of the fireplace. I felt warm, secure. This was the moment, I thought. This was how family was supposed to feel. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a notification from Facebook. Mum had posted the photo. The caption read, "Family forever. We made it through." I tapped the image, expecting to see the four of us, but the crop stopped just at my shoulder. In the frame, Mum, Dad, and Mark smiled broadly, the glow of the fire behind them. My face, my entire presence, was gone. At first I thought it was an accident. I stared at the photo for a long time, my coffee cooling beside me. My hand hovered over the comment box, but I stopped. Why did my chest feel heavy over something so small? I told myself not to dwell on it. Maybe she'd just picked the best composition. Maybe I was overthinking. I was still replaying the thought when the family group chat lit up 2 nights later. Mark had started it. "So, for Thanksgiving, I'll be hosting at my place this year." Mom chimed in right away. "Perfect, we'll bring dessert." "Dad, we'll be there early." My thumb hovered over the keyboard, but my name never came up. No one asked about my schedule. No one mentioned me at all. I typed, "Should I bring anything?" but deleted it before hitting send. Instead, I waited, thinking maybe Mum would remember. The next morning, she texted me privately, "Sweetheart, you don't need to worry about Thanksgiving this year. Mark's handling it. Just relax." I stared at the words. I typed, "Did I do something wrong?" Her reply came fast. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. You work so hard. It's time for you to take a break." That should have reassured me, but it didn't. Something about the way she dismissed my question, like I was making a fuss over nothing, made my skin prickle. I wanted to push, but I knew how that would go. They'd circle the wagons, make me feel like the problem. A week before the holiday, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. Thick, cream-coloured, with my address written in careful script. Inside was a formal invitation to Thanksgiving dinner. hosted by Mark. The envelope said Mark and family in bold script across the top. My name was nowhere on the actual invitation. It was a generic printout with the date, time, and address. I turned it over in my hands, wondering if this was some kind of oversight. Then I noticed the return address, Aunt Maggie's. She must have sent it thinking I'd been invited. My chest tightened. Did she know I wasn't supposed to come? Or had Mark told her I was? I imagined the look on her face when she realised I wouldn't be there. The question she'd ask later. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, the invitation lying beside me, my phone glowing with unanswered texts from friends asking about holiday plans. I could tell them the truth, but what was the truth? That I'd bailed my parents out of debt, only to be erased from a family photo and excluded from the biggest dinner of the year? It sounded ridiculous, petty even, and yet there was a sour taste in my mouth I couldn't ignore. I picked up the phone, scrolled through the group chat, reread the messages. My name wasn't there. Not even a casual Laura, "Are you coming?" Just silence, like I didn't exist. I thought about texting Mark directly, asking why. But I could already hear his voice in my head, that half laugh, the condescension. "You're reading too much into it, sis." I slid the invitation into the back of my desk drawer and shut it, out of sight, but not out of mind. The image of that cropped photo from Facebook came back to me, sharper now, like a warning I hadn't understood at the time. Something was happening, something deliberate. I didn't know what it was yet, but I could feel the shape of it, just out of reach. And it was pulling me toward a truth I might not be ready to see. The week after Thanksgiving, my phone rang while I was making coffee. It was Aunt Maggie. Her voice had that low, gossipy hum it always carried when she was about to share something juicy. "You'll never believe what Mark told everyone at dinner," she began. My stomach tightened. "He said he was the one who saved your parents from bankruptcy. Told them he put up all the money to pay off their debt." I gripped the counter, my pulse spiking. "He what?" "He's even talking to Uncle David about funding his new real estate project. Says it's proof he can manage money under pressure." I hung up a few minutes later, my coffee cold. My first instinct was to call Mark and confront him, but I knew how that would go. He'd twist my words, make me sound ungrateful. I decided to call Mom instead. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright but guarded. I told her what Aunt Maggie had said. There was a pause, then, "Sweetheart, you know how your brother is. Just let him have this. It's important for him to look good in front of the family." "Let him have this? Mum, it's my money, my savings." "Laura," she sighed, "you don't need the recognition. You've always been strong, independent. Mark, well, he's fragile. If people knew the truth, it would embarrass him." The words landed like stones. Embarrass him? I was the one being erased. I bit my tongue, swallowing the sharp retort building in my throat. 2 days later, while scrolling through Facebook, I saw a post from one of Mark's friends. Photos of him shaking hands with 2 men in suits, a contract open on the table. The caption read, "Another big deal in the making. Proud of you, Mark." I zoomed in on the photo. The heading on the document was faint but visible. Investment agreement. And there in the financial disclosures was a line that made my stomach drop. Initial capital provided, $120,000. It was my money, my sacrifice, being used as a stepping stone for his next venture. I felt heat rush up my neck. He hadn't just stolen credit, he was using my financial rescue as collateral to build his empire of lies. I wanted to scream, but instead I took a screenshot and saved it. My hand shook as I slid my phone into my pocket. A month later, the invitations for Cousin Rachel's wedding started popping up on social media. Everyone seemed to be going, except me. I checked my mail twice a day, nothing. I told myself maybe it was lost, but then I saw the family group chat, buzzing with talk about outfits, flights, hotel rooms. I typed, "Is Rachel's wedding this weekend?" And within seconds, Mark replied, "Yeah, just close family though, close family." That night, Aunt Maggie called again, her voice sharp. "Why aren't you coming to the wedding? Rachel was upset when you didn't RSVP." "I wasn't invited," I said flatly. There was a beat of silence. Then, in a voice edged with anger, she told me what Mark had been saying. He told everyone you've distanced yourself from the family, that you refused to help when Mum and Dad were in trouble. Said you only care about your career and your friends. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. "That's a lie," I whispered. "I know," she said, and her tone softened. "Laura, you need to know something. The debt your parents had, that wasn't from medical bills like they told you. It was from an investment Mark made. He lost everything and they covered for him because they didn't want him to look bad. They asked me to keep quiet, but I can't anymore." Her words hit me like a blow to the ribs. I gripped the edge of my desk, feeling the room tilt. Every sleepless night I'd spent worrying about them, every dollar I'd saved and sacrificed, it had been to clean up Mark's mess. "Why didn't they tell me?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "They've always believed he needed protecting, and you've always been the strong one." I thanked her, my voice barely steady, and hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the wall, my thoughts spiraling. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about a lifetime of being the safety net, the invisible scaffold holding everyone else up while they pretended I wasn't there. But now I wasn't just hurt. I was angry. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I'd keep their secrets anymore. It happened on a rainy Thursday, the kind of day when the sky seemed to press down on the house. I'd stopped by my parents' place to drop off some mail that had been mistakenly sent to my address. Mum was in the kitchen, clattering pans, and Dad was in his study, with the door ajar. I meant to leave the envelopes on the hall table, but when I passed the study, a stack of papers caught my eye. The bold heading read, "Last Will and Testament." I froze. My name was there in small print, only once, under a clause about acknowledging the existence of both children. The rest was clear. Every piece of property, every bank account, every asset was to go to Mark. And there, buried near the end, was a clause that made my stomach knot. Should Laura initiate any legal action contesting this will, she shall forfeit all rights, including any sentimental or personal items. My fingers trembled as I flipped the pages. Then I saw it, another copy, not stapled, with handwritten notes in the margins. The ink was different, but the handwriting was familiar. At the bottom of page 3, next to the clause about me, someone had scrawled, "Mark requested this be added." Requested, not suggested, not discussed. He had gone to them deliberately to make sure I was cut out. I slid the papers back exactly as I'd found them and walked out, my pulse loud in my ears. The drive home was a blur of wet roads and taillights, my hands gripping the wheel too tight. That night, Sleep wouldn't come. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, every thought sharper than glass. I replayed every moment from the past few months, the cropped photo, the group chat, the wedding I wasn't invited to, Aunt Maggie's confession about the debt. It all pointed to the same thing. Mark hadn't just stumbled into this. He'd been building it, brick by brick, for years. And my parents had been helping him. Days bled together. I stopped answering calls. Food lost its taste. Some mornings I'd wake up already exhausted, the weight in my chest heavier than when I'd closed my eyes. At night, I'd scroll through old photos, looking for proof that things had once been different. But even the happy moments looked brittle now, staged. I thought about confronting them, but what would that do? They'd deny it, twist it, tell me I was being dramatic. They'd point to my career, my independence, as proof I didn't need anything from them. And maybe I didn't need their money, but I needed the truth. One night, unable to sleep, I opened my email to find a new message from Mark. No subject line, just a single sentence. Thanks for everything. Now disappear. I read it 3 times. The tone wasn't angry or emotional. It was cold, almost casual, like he was signing off on a business transaction. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. This was it. This was his final move, the clean cut he'd been sharpening for years. For a moment, I almost laughed. There was something absurd about the way he'd stripped me from our family, like peeling a sticker off a window. No ceremony, no guilt, just a quick rip. But the laughter died before it reached my throat. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark, the sound of rain tapping against the window. I thought about the years I'd spent believing we were a family, the countless times I'd stepped in to help, the sacrifices I'd made without asking for anything in return. And here I was, alone in an apartment that felt too quiet, with nothing but a single line in an email to mark the end of it all. Somewhere deep down, a part of me still wanted to believe there was a misunderstanding, that this could somehow be fixed, but another part, louder now, knew there was no going back. It started with a box I wasn't supposed to open. A week after Mark's email, I drove to my parents' house to drop off some photos of Grandma that Aunt Maggie had asked me to return. Mum wasn't home, and Dad was in the garage tinkering with something. In the living room, near the bookshelf, sat an old cedar chest I remembered from childhood. It had always been locked, but that day the lid was slightly ajar. I don't know why I lifted it. Maybe I wanted to feel close to something real, something untouched by the mess my family had become. Inside were brittle letters, faded photos, and a leather-bound notebook I recognized instantly, Mom's old journal. I hesitated, then opened it. The pages smelled faintly of lavender. At first, it was filled with everyday notes, shopping lists, garden updates. But then halfway through, I saw my name. Mark is so sensitive, bless him. He needs protecting. Laura's strong. She always has been. She'll stand on her own 2 feet no matter what. I read it again. The words weren't cruel. In her mind, they were almost affectionate. But the more I read, the colder I felt. She hadn't favoured Mark because she loved him more. She'd favoured him because she saw him as fragile and me as unbreakable. But if she believed I could stand alone, why did she join him in pushing me out? Why erase me from the photo? Why let him take credit for what I'd done? That question burned in my chest. I slipped the journal back into the chest and closed it. But the words clung to me. On the drive home, I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I thought about every choice I'd made to help them, every moment I'd swallowed my pride. And for what? So they could keep their illusion intact? By the time I reached my apartment, something inside me had shifted. The grief was still there, but it had hardened, edged with a new clarity. I wasn't just their safety net, I was their silence, and I'd had enough. That night, I pulled out the folder where I'd been keeping the screenshots. The Facebook post with the cropped photo, the investment contract with my money listed as initial capital, Mark's email telling me to disappear. I added new photos, close-ups of the will and the draft with his handwritten request to cut me out. The next day, I called Aunt Maggie. "I need your help," I said, and my voice didn't shake. She listened as I laid it out, every detail. "You're not the first," she said when I finished. Mark borrowed 20 grand from me 5 years ago, never paid it back. Told the family I'd offered it as a gift. Her voice was tight, a mix of anger and relief. I asked if she'd be willing to talk to someone else who'd been in my shoes. She gave me a name, Uncle Rob, who'd invested in one of Mark's failed startups. That evening, I met Rob at a quiet cafe. He was cautious at first, but when I showed him the folder, something in his expression cracked. "He told me your parents backed him," he said. "I didn't know it was you." We sat there for over an hour, comparing notes, realizing how many times Mark had pulled the same tricks on different people. By the time we stood to leave, we had a plan. Gather more evidence, build a record that couldn't be dismissed as drama or misunderstanding. Driving home, the December air sharp in my lungs, I felt the first flicker of something I hadn't in months. Control. I wasn't just reacting anymore, I was preparing. When I got back, I opened my laptop and began a new folder labelled Truth. Inside, I placed every file, every photo, every message. The weight that had been pressing down on me began to lift. Just a little. Still, Mum's journal entry replayed in my head. If she thought she was helping me by letting me stand alone, she was wrong. She hadn't given me independence. She'd given me isolation. And now I was going to show them what standing alone really looked like. The anniversary celebration for my grandparents was the kind of event my family treated like a royal gathering. Every relative within a 100-mile radius would be there, cousins, in-laws, old friends who'd been adopted into the family over decades. It was tradition to rent out the big banquet hall in the community centre, the one with mirrored walls and chandeliers that pretended to be crystal. For weeks, I'd known this was my moment. The folder labelled Truth on my laptop was now overflowing. Bank statements showing the wire transfers, screenshots of Mark's public lies, copies of the will with his handwritten note, and, perhaps most damning, the page from Mum's journal where she spelled out her favouritism. I'd debated whether to include that last one. It wasn't as clear-cut as the financial evidence, but it showed the mindset that had fueled years of erasure. I arrived early, my laptop bag slung over my shoulder. The hall buzzed with chatter and the clinking of glassware. Mark was already there, surrounded by a small circle of admirers, laughing like he was the guest of honour. My parents moved from table to table, smiling, shaking hands, the perfect hosts. When the speeches began, I waited. My turn wasn't on the schedule, but I'd arranged with the banquet manager to have the projector ready for a quick surprise. When the microphone was free, I stepped up, my pulse hammering in my ears. "I'd like to share something with the family," I said, my voice steady, despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. "A few truths, actually." The lights dimmed, and on the big screen appeared the first slide, a bank statement showing the $120,000 transfer to my parents' account. Gasps rippled through the room. The next slide was a screenshot of Mark's public post claiming he'd stepped in to save the family. Then came the investment contract. My money listed as the initial capital for his real estate project. I could see Mark's face shifting. First confusion, then the tight-jawed anger he got when he couldn't control the narrative. The next slide was the will, complete with the clause cutting me out and the note in his handwriting. Murmurs rose to a low roar. My parents' faces had gone pale. Finally, I showed the page from Mum's journal. My voice didn't waver as I read it aloud. "Mark is so sensitive, bless him. He needs protecting. Laura's strong. She always has been. She'll stand on her own 2 feet, no matter what." I let the words hang in the air. Then I said, "Strength doesn't mean invisibility, and independence doesn't mean I deserve to be erased." The room was silent except for the hum of the projector fan. Then, from the front table, Mum's voice broke through. She was crying, tears slipping down her cheeks. She turned to Mark and, loud enough for the whole room to hear, said, "Mark, enough." It was like a crack of thunder. Mark's chair scraped back. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, but the damage was done. People were whispering, some openly glaring at him. Aunt Maggie stood up and added, "She's not lying. He's done this before, to me, to Rob. You all just didn't want to see it." The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just my fight anymore, it was an unravelling. Mark's girlfriend, a tall woman with dark hair who'd been sitting at his side, slowly stood. "Is it true?" she asked him. He didn't answer. That was all she needed. She grabbed her purse and walked out, the sound of her heels sharp against the tile. The rest of the night was chaos. My parents tried to smooth things over, but it was impossible. Relatives were pulling me aside, apologising, asking questions. Mark stormed out halfway through, his expression twisted in fury. By the time the party ended, the once pristine image of our perfect family was fractured beyond repair. The next morning, I woke to a string of text messages, most from relatives thanking me for telling the truth. Some from people I barely knew, sharing their own experiences of being the strong one who got nothing but scraps. But the most surprising message came from cousin Henry, someone I'd never been particularly close to. "Just so you know," he wrote, "Mark was planning to ask Grandma and Grandpa for a $50,000 loan this weekend. Said he was going to give it to you so you'd drop the drama." I stared at the words. It was almost laughable. He thought he could buy my silence after all this. And yet, it also chilled me, because it meant he still believed this was just a problem to be managed, not a truth that had detonated the centre of our family. I put the phone down and looked out the window. The sky was clear, bright, the kind of winter morning that felt like a clean slate. I didn't know what would happen next, but for the first time in a long time, I felt unshakably certain about one thing. I wasn't going back to being their silence. I left the city in early spring, the air still crisp but carrying the promise of warmth. The movers hauled the last of my boxes into a small white cottage that sat just above the shoreline. From the porch, I could hear the steady hush of waves against the sand, a sound that felt like it could rinse the past clean if I let it. The house was nothing like the polished apartment I'd kept in the city. It was smaller, worn in places, but it was mine. And for the first time in years, the walls felt like they belonged to me. I spent the first few weeks painting, planting herbs in the garden, and walking the beach at dawn. My phone rarely rang except for calls from Aunt Maggie or Rob, who checked in often. The rest of my family had gone silent, the void almost eerie but not unwelcome. One afternoon, I opened my laptop to catch up on emails and found my story splashed across half a dozen blogs. Someone had posted a thread about the anniversary night, piecing together details from relatives' social media posts. Within days, the thread had gone viral. People were tagging me, sharing their own stories of being the strong one who was taken for granted. Messages poured into my inbox. Some were angry on my behalf. Others were quiet thank yous from strangers who'd been through the same thing. It was overwhelming, but also oddly comforting. I wasn't alone. My pain had a shape others recognized. Then, one morning, an email appeared from an address I didn't recognize. No greeting, no name, just a single line. I know another secret about Mark. I read it 3 times, my pulse quickening. The message ended with, "If you want to know, reply." I stared at the screen, the weight of it settling in my chest. Part of me wanted to hit delete, to let whatever it was die in the ashes of what had already burned. But another part, curious, sharper now, wanted to see the full map of his deceit. I closed the laptop without answering, the question hanging in the air like a thread I could pull at any moment. By summer, I had a new rhythm. I hosted dinners with friends who'd become my chosen family. People who didn't measure worth by what you could give them, but by how you showed up. That November, for the first time in years, I cooked a Thanksgiving meal from scratch. The table was crowded with mismatched chairs, candles flickering, and plates piled high. We went around sharing what we were grateful for, and when it was my turn, I said simply, that I'm here with people who see me. There was no tension, no careful choreography to avoid landmines, just laughter, warmth, and the sense that this was what a family was supposed to feel like. Outside of that circle, I began speaking in support groups, both online and in person. I told my story in full, not as a tale of betrayal, but as a reminder that boundaries are not cruelty, they are survival. Faces in the audience would nod, some with tears in their eyes, and afterward people would approach to tell me their own versions of my story. Each time I felt the same quiet conviction. The more we spoke, the less power silence had over us. On quiet nights, I'd still think about the email. I'd wonder what else Mark had done, and if knowing it would change anything. Maybe one day I'd reply, maybe not. For now, the mystery didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a reminder that no matter what secrets lurked in the shadows, I'd already stepped into the light. The waves outside my window kept their steady rhythm. And for the first time in a long time, I realized I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was living fully in the life I'd chosen,